What's up, guys? John Ross from Ross Racing here with another video. As you can see behind me, the bodywork on the B-mod is actually starting to take shape here finally. So I'm going to kind of walk you through some of what I've been doing on that and show you some of the tips and tricks for bodywork and what all goes into building a body for one of these race cars. So much like if you watched the video where we did the introduction on Patrick's Mod Light project, all the body panels on this car are laser cut and then bent on a press brake from over at Medieval Chassis. However, that being said, there are a few kind of areas that I like to customize. For one thing, we kind of leave the wheel well openings a little bit on the small side so that they can be cut to fit. I actually just kind of copied the openings on the panels from my car from last year and cut those by hand with the 10 snips, and generally that requires a little bit of adjustment on any car that you're going to build. The other thing that I like to do a little bit different, let's take a look at the leading edge of this sail panel here. So this is something that I added to the sail panel is a little bit longer on a typical like A mod than it is on a B mod, so I had a little bit of extra material to work with here and created an extra bend there to add a little bit more stiffness. Then I shrunk this edge with a sheet metal shrinker to give it the radius. And that was something new that I tried last year. And then this year, in addition to that, I'm also doing the same thing along the back here, along the inside edge of the back of the sail panel on both sides. So hopefully that adds a little bit of stiffness, helps add a little bit of side force. That's one thing to think about with these cars. The two primary tracks I'm focusing on running this year are both relatively big, half mile or 4/10 mile tracks where we get up to pushing 100 miles an hour. And at those speeds, aerodynamics do come into play, especially if you look at how flat the sides of this car is and any dirt track car like it. You've got a lot of side force if you can keep that body nice and stiff on the right side where it's laying into the wind. And so that's something that we're going to focus a lot of effort on, is not just the body work, making it look nice, making it look good for our sponsors that are putting their name on the car, but also everything that goes in behind the body work to help support it. You got to make sure that not only does it hold the body work in place, but also, say if you're rubbing and beating and banging with somebody, that it's able to bounce back. So with that in mind, you can see that there's only a handful of bolts and some clecos holding the side of this car on. We're actually going to take that back off and finish the supports behind it, and I also need to get in there to bleed the brakes. So I'm going to take that apart and show you guys a couple other things. So now we got the bodywork pulled back off of this side of the car. As you can see, I kind of set the door and quarter set them in the position that they're going to be relative to one another and riveted them together. That's so that we can take our wrap and wrap that all as one piece to hopefully keep all the lines nice and straight. The wrap for this car is going to be what they call a half wrap, meaning that it just encompasses the doors and quarters and, of course, the sail panels. So speaking of this sail panel, I'm going to actually take this sheet metal shrinker here and do a little bit more fine adjustment to the radius along the back edge of the panel. I noticed that the way that it was sitting there was kind of a little bit of a kink in the middle of the panel, and I determined by the way that I pushed and kind of bent it by hand that if I add a little bit more radius to that back edge, it'll help the thing lay in there a little bit smoother and look a little bit nicer. So I'll show you how that works. So this sheet metal shrinker is a pretty neat little tool. As you can see, it's got these teeth in it that when you press down on the lever, they kind of grab the metal and push it together. And if you do that on one flange that's kind of perpendicular to another flange, it can create a nice smooth radius. I'll show you how that works when we actually do it. there you have it. I think that made for a nice, clean radius. Makes the panel all flow nice and, look like it was meant to be there. So I'm pretty happy with that. With these shrinkers or stretchers, one thing to remember is you always just want to go a little bit at a time, because it's always easier to add more than it is to take some off. Now, obviously you have, like I showed you, the shrinker. A stretcher would do the opposite, would bend things back in the opposite direction. Oh, well, it's tornado siren day, how about that? But yeah, a stretcher will bend it back in the opposite direction, but you gotta remember this is aluminum, so it will fatigue, it will crack if you bend it back and forth too many times. So as I'm sure you can tell, a lot of work has gotten done since the last time I did some filming for this video. Obviously the intention was to document the whole process of putting the body on the car, wrapping it. Well, we've got about 3 days left before our first race, and yeah, getting the car done took priority over getting the video done, as I'm sure you can understand. With that being said, I do want to go ahead and show you a few of the things that we did here, kind of go back and document them in retrospective so you can see some of what was involved in putting the body on this car. So up here at the front of the car, first of all, a big shout out to longtime sponsor Enterprise Realty and Auction out of Maryville, Missouri. Those guys are awesome. They've been on the car ever since my rookie season. And, if you're looking for farmland, land for recreation, whatnot in northern Missouri and Iowa, surrounding states, hit them up. Also Moon Pie Garage. But yeah, here at the front of the car, as you can see, we built a whole new nose assembly, got a brand new shiny front bumper that's probably going to get destroyed the first time out. But we pull this off. As you can see, I added some bracing up underneath and actually tied that in. You can't really see it from this angle, but tied that in with a piece of aluminum that's riveted to the valance to try to support the front end of the car, keep that nice and stiff as the air is flowing over it. Downforce isn't maybe as much of a thing on these cars as is on, say, an asphalt car, but, every little bit counts. And you can see here these rivets along the front. That's where there's a piece of angle up on the underside of that. Nice and stiff. Up here from the back, you can see we got some fresh aluminum straps and angle. Oh, well, still got to tighten the bolts on that. So that's the one last thing that I have left to do. But we've got all kinds of support up here all the way down the right side of the car. So when I'm throwing that thing into the corner sideways at 80 to 100 miles an hour, depending on the track, it's going to be just a nice flat plane that hits the wind and gives us nice side force. So that's pretty much all there is to it as far as the bodywork on this thing. We did wrap the doors and quarter panels individually, took them off of the car and stuck them to a table with some command strips, and that made laying the wrap out a nice easy process. As you can tell, this is a much different wrap than what we went with the last couple seasons. I've been wanting to try this idea of making like a woody station wagon type wrap for a long time now, and I think it looks awesome. Now, it's probably not everybody's cup of tea, but I'm excited about it. So yeah, with that in mind, I'm going to get on with really the only thing we have left to do, which is scaling and setting this car up. I'm probably going to try to document some of that on video. I may not get it all this week because we're rushing to get to the track, but at some point, probably the next video that we're going to do, besides the at the track stuff, is going to be like a series probably on setting up and scaling your car and going through that process, because that's an important thing for a racer to know how to do. So thank you for sticking with the channel if you've been watching us up to this point, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one.